Hi artists! Today we're going to have our last day to work on our Still Life with Sunflower project inspired by Vincent van Gogh. We started this project in pencil first, then we added details and outlined in Sharpie second. Today, our goal is we want to add color, and I'm going to show you some coloring techniques. Here we go. To finish your Still Life with Sunflower project today, you're going to need your picture from last time, and you're also going to need a coloring supply of your choice. You can use crayons, you can use colored pencils, you can use markers if you have markers available. It's really up to you. You can even use watercolor paint, but be really careful if you're going to use watercolor paint. Only use watercolor paint if you used a permanent art supply like a Sharpie or a black crayon to outline with. If you used an art supply like a washable marker to outline with, your marker color might bleed through and kind of get all over the page and mix with the watercolor paint. So just be aware of that. Make a good selection of art supply when you are choosing one for your picture today. Now, when you're adding color, you can think about the real color of sunflowers. I would definitely start with the sunflowers first. Sunflowers in real life traditionally are different shades of yellow. Some are bright, some are a little bit darker. The inside of a sunflower, the seeds are usually different shades of brown, light brown, dark brown. The stems, of course, and the leaves are shades of green. And some sunflowers, they do have orange or red towards the center. So you can think about real sunflowers that you've seen in real life. Do your best. Now, when you're adding color, I always like to outline my shape first if I'm using a dry supply like crayons or colored pencils or markers, and then I can kind of color in the inside. Something that looks really nice is if you use different shades of a color, like crayon boxes have multiple shades of yellow, so feel free to kind of experiment with that. If you look at a crayon box, you're going to find many shades of the same color, so you can kind of play around with that. Something really fun you can do is you can blend colors as well. Let me show you what I mean. Sunflowers in real life they have brown centers. So something that you guys can do is you can color inside the center of your sunflower brown, and you can experiment with how dark or how light your color is. You can do that with crayons. It's pretty cool that crayons can do this. So I just made a medium shade of brown. If I want to make a darker shade of brown, I can take a black crayon and I can just kind of really carefully shade black over the center, and it'll make my brown a little bit darker. If I want to make a light center of the sunflower, something fun that I could do is I can kind of outline my center, and I can push really lightly with my crayon, and I can get a lighter color. So you can really see the difference. This is pretty dark, this is pretty light. So see if you can kind of experiment with that today if you're choosing to use crayons. You can even do that for your sunflower if you'd like to. If I use a yellow and I want to make the sunflower petals a little bit like more vibrant in the middle, I can find an orange and I can kind of add a little bit of a layer of orange towards the center of the flower to kind of give it a little bit more dimension. So these are just fun techniques that you can try to make your sunflower come to life a little bit more. Now, if you're going to use markers today, markers, they don't really blend as well as crayons do, but they do look pretty great, so feel free to use markers if you have them at home. It's a personal decision, okay? Now we're gonna talk about watercolor paint. If you're one of the people out there who's gonna choose to use watercolor paint for this project, I definitely recommend using a placemat. And the placemat is gonna serve two purposes. One purpose of the placemat is to protect the table. Another purpose of the placemat is to wipe off your brush on so that it is not super wet so that you can paint small spaces. So let me show you what I mean. If you are going to use watercolor paint, you do need a cup of water, you do need paint, you do need a brush, you do need a placemat. Let's say I want to paint this big puffball sunflower. I'm going to dip my brush in the water. I'm going to swirl my brush in the yellow, so really gently. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to really carefully paint the inside. And if you notice, my brush isn't super wet. Because my paintbrush is not very wet, I am able to paint inside the shape that I've created without fear of it going outside and getting all over the place. Now, if you have a really wet paintbrush and you're trying to paint a really teeny tiny area, like let's say I'm trying to paint this stem. The stem is so narrow. Oh my goodness, it's like more narrow than the bristles of my paintbrush. I have to be a problem solver. What I'm gonna do before I paint is I'm gonna use my placemat, or you can even use a scrap piece of paper, and I'm gonna get some of the water off. Water is what makes the color kind of spread out. So if you're trying to paint a really small, teeny tiny area, try to get your brush kind of dry. I'm just really gently wiping the brush. I'm gonna dip it back in the green, which I did get a little wet. And then I can really carefully, with my dry brush, paint the stem, and it's magically not going outside the line. So this is tricky. This is something that you guys can definitely try if you are somebody out there who's using watercolor paint. And you can do the same thing with watercolor paint that you can do with crayons as well. You can kind of blend colors if you'd like to. Something you can try. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before to the center. If I want to make a light brown, I can add a little bit more water to the color, and the color becomes very light. It's like a tan color. If I want it to be a darker brown, I'm going to add a little bit more paint, and I'm going to spread it out before it dries, and it'll get even darker. If I want it to be even darker than that, I'm going to rinse off my brush. I'm going to wipe it a little bit dry. I can add a little touch of black, and I can darken up the shade. So again, more things to experiment with. Feel free to mix your yellows as well for your petals. If I want to add a little bit of brown here to the petal, I can make the color look a little bit duller, like Vincent van Gogh, his puffball sunflowers. The color is not as vibrant as the ones where we can see the individual petals. So feel free to kind of use that color palette that Vincent van Gogh chose to use as well. Now, when you are painting the vase, you can use whatever colors you want. Vincent van Gogh must have been in a really yellow mood when he painted this picture, because he really used a lot of different shades of yellow. He has a yellow in the background, a yellow on the vase. Do you have to use a yellow? Of course not. You can use whatever color you want to. Maybe you would like your vase to be red. Maybe you're somebody who added a design to your vase and you would like to color that in or paint that in if you're using paint. It's really up to you, the color choices that you make. So do your very best with that. when you are painting or coloring today, my recommended order is do the sunflowers first. They're the most important. That's what the whole picture's about. I would do the vase second, and I would save the background and the table for last. Once you get your sunflowers in and the vase in, you'll know which color choices would be best suited for your picture, for the table, and the background. Try to paint or add color to all parts of the picture so it looks complete. I hope that you have so much fun. Feel free to mix art supplies if you would like to. Like, I used markers, crayons, and paint on mine, and it actually looks pretty good. It kind of gives it a little bit of different texture and variety. So have fun with this, experiment with it. Don't forget to use a placemat when you're coloring the edges or the background space. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Have fun!